Hey guys, thanks for coming back to join us here at Salty Ginger Talk. Glad to have you back. So today in our episode, we're going to talk about the Electoral College. What is it? Why is it important? Uh, why does it exist? Is there a chance it won't exist? So on and so forth. It's interesting to note that most elections, and most being, I think it's all but five, if I remember correctly, there's been no issues with the Electoral College. The Electoral College has broken the same way as the popular vote. Now, in the past, whatever it is, 20 years or so, there's been several elections. George W. Bush in 2000 lost the popular vote to Al Gore, but won the Electoral College. Controversial with the decision on the Florida ballot recounts. And then in 2016, Donald Trump lost the popular election to Hillary Clinton, um, and was still elected president by what did he get? 306 votes in the. He needed 270 to win and got 306 in the Electoral College. So it's a fairly rare occurrence, although it's happened twice in the last 20 years recently, on the popular vote not breaking the same way as the Electoral College. But with all that said, I think it's a good question to ask. We actually got asked by one of our listeners to do an episode on the Electoral College. And so I thought it made sense. I thought it was a good topic. And so we're going to do a brief overview of the Electoral College, explanation of it today, why it exists, how it works, and right, wrong, or indifferent. It is the system by which we actually elect the President of the United States. So I think that's the important place to start. The president and vice president are not chosen by a nationwide popular vote. Never have been. It's always been the Electoral College since the adoption and ratification of the U.S. Constitution. Um, Currently, it's 538 electors. That number has changed over time as the number of states in the union changed and then the population in the country changed, but the Electoral College is actually spelled out in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution. Now, it's been modified a couple of times. It was modified by the 12th Amendment in 1804, and it was modified by the 23rd Amendment in 1961. But with that said, the Electoral College has been in place since the inception of the U.S. Constitution. And so, not the inception of the country, because remember, for about the first, 10, 11 years, the country operated under the Articles of Confederation, which proved problematic because there wasn't enough power for the central government. And that was the age old tug of war back in the day, was the argument between states' rights and the rights of the federal government. And that pops up in the Electoral College as well. That was one of the things the Electoral College was designed to try to balance, that argument between states' rights and a strong, overpowering, call it, central government. So right now it's 538 electors, and that number is the number of senators in each state, which is two, as you know, so that's 100, and then the number of representatives in the House. So you might say, okay, well, there's 435 representatives in the House, 100 senators. That's 535. How do we get to 538? Washington, D.C. is actually given three electors in the Electoral College to cast their vote for president and vice president via those electors. And that's how you get to 538. One for each senator, one for each representative in the House of Representatives, and three for the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. So um, those electors are chosen by each state in different ways, largely through the each political party in the state House of Representatives. But so it's each state elects two sets right now because there's two political parties, two sets of electors. And so if a Republican wins, a Republican candidate for president wins your state, the Republican nominated and or appointed electors are the ones that attend the Electoral College when it happens. And if the Democrat candidate wins your state, then the Democrat slate of electors are the group that attends the Electoral College for your state. So, okay, great. Why? Why is it set up that way? Why did we not just do a popular vote? Um, so it's actually very intentional. The founders had no intention of creating a pure democracy. And we've talked about it in a video before. When you think about a pure democracy, it will devolve to mob rule every time. And history has shown that. When you can get one more vote than the other side and jam through any type of law or regulation or punishment that you want on your political enemies, that creates a very dangerous situation. Um, so the founding fathers studied history and were dead set against a democracy. So when you hear all the conversation now about needing to protect democracy, we are not a democracy. We've never been a democracy. We're a democratic republic, always have been, and it's important to keep that in mind. Um, the easiest, like we've talked about, when two wolves and one sheep vote on what's for dinner, you know what's for dinner. It's sheep, right? So that's the most basic way to think about it. Um, and the Electoral College is yet one more attempt to make sure that there isn't centralized power, so you can just kind of jam stuff through our government and create a situation where one party can essentially lord over another party without the backing of the populace of the United States, which is the theory behind the democratic republic. So it's very similar to the way we have three branches of government, right? We've decentralized the power. So we've got a legislative branch, which is Congress. We've got an executive branch, which is the president. And then we've got the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court and the district courts below that. And it's set up that way on purpose. So the legislative branch can make the laws. The executive branch provides leadership and enforces the laws, and the judicial interprets the laws and upholds the Constitution to make sure laws that are passed are in fact constitutional within the purview of the federal government. Taking it down a step further, there's two senators for each state, and there's representatives based on the population of each state. And recall, 538 is all one for each senator, one for each representative, and three for District of Columbia. But even when you look at how those houses are structured and how they're elected, it shows that the founding fathers were very deliberate about how they set up the government. So, representatives, which are based on the number of people that live in your state, they're elected every 2 years. And so they represent the population, and every 2 years you get a chance to change who is representing your district, whatever district you live in. The president, the executive branch, is replaced or voted on every 4 years. And then senators are replaced or voted on every 6 years. And if you think about that, let's say you've got let's just pick a party, Republican senators, and there's 10 representatives in your state, and 8 of the 10 are Republicans. And your state shifts, it changes. Let's say there's a migration from California to Texas, for example, and you want the people that move lean more Democratic. And so they want to change who represents them. That can't happen in 2 years. So you can change the representatives in 2 years, but it's going to take 6, maybe 8 to 12 years to change both senators out, because you don't both senators in a particular state are not up for election at the same time. It's staggered, so a third of the senators in the Senate are up for election every every 2 years. So every 2 years there's a senator up for re-election. So the two in your state might not be this cycle. That means one of them would come the cycle after that. The other one would follow the cycle after that. So you need at least 6 years to change that, and then you throw the president in there. It takes a while to make changes to the makeup of the government, and that was done on purpose, without question. And that feeds into the Electoral College. That's set up so that you can't just get one more vote than the other group and ramrod your stuff through. You could make promises, you could buy people's votes, And then once you're in power, you could change everything the way you wanted it. You could get a super majority that way, and it would be very dangerous. So that was very intentional by the founding fathers. So, and it's the same reason, like we just talked about, the same reason the the elections are staggered and the time periods each of those offices serve are staggered. It's the same reason why it's so difficult to amend the Constitution. So, in order to amend the Constitution, you need a supermajority in Congress. That's 2/3 in each chamber. And you need 3/4 of the states to ratify an amendment to the Constitution in order to amend the Constitution. That's why there's only, what is it, 26 amendments to the Constitution in the 250 plus years that it's existed. It's difficult on purpose. It's difficult to change that document. There's a mechanism by which to change it, but they made it difficult on purpose because it requires consensus. It requires working with opposing viewpoints, opposing thoughts, opposing ideas. That's exactly why the Electoral College is in place. So, if you had a popular vote, let's think about it logically. You could, if you had a popular vote and you said, you know what, I'm going to win Los Angeles. Take the top 10 most populated cities. I'm going to win Los Angeles. I'm going to win New York. I'm going to win Chicago. I'm going to win Houston, so on and so forth. And I don't really care what happens in Montana or Nebraska or Mississippi or New Hampshire. Um, I don't have to worry about them because I can win enough votes in the other places to get myself elected, and then I can do whatever I want. So I don't care what happens in the less populated places. That'd be a very dangerous way to elect the president for the reasons we've talked about. You could build a consensus on a majority that uh, only had their interests in mind and didn't care at all about what happened with the rest of the country. And that would be super dangerous way um, to manage the country. And so that's why another reason why the Electoral College is in place. So you got to think about it. It's not a national election, it's 51 individual elections. And what you're voting for when you make those votes, when you vote for president, you're actually voting for the slate of electors that you want to attend the Electoral College and cast the votes for your state based on your vote in your state. So you're not voting for that particular candidate. You're voting for the electors who will go and support and elect that candidate. And you're doing that by state. And so that's why the national election is really meaningless. That's why you have to look at it by state. And so the analogy I use is a lot of people want to point to, like in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the national popular vote. Without question, she won the national popular vote. With that said, that's not how we elect the president. So it's the equivalent of going to a basketball game and saying, well, okay, so the Celtics scored more points than the Heat, but the Heat got more rebounds. So the Heat really should have won the game because they got more rebounds than the Celtics did. Well, that's not how we determine the winner of a basketball game either. We determine the winner of a basketball game by points. Everyone knows that going into the game. There's been no changes. It's not been hidden. It's not been changed. It's not been sprung on anybody. That's exactly how it works, and everybody knows exactly how it works ahead of an election. So this argument that, well, it's not the right way to elect the president. We've been electing the president this way for 200 plus years. It's not new. It's not hidden. It's very straightforward how it works to both political parties. We can talk about whether there should be more than two political parties. I think absolutely that's the case. But even so, the Electoral College is a pretty cool mechanism by which you can balance the overall population's wishes and make sure that each state or each area of the country gets representation. Because if you look at like George W. Bush's win in 2000, yes, he was handed the win when Florida was decided, but like he flipped West Virginia. West Virginia has 4 votes. West Virginia had voted Democrat for decades before that election. And without flipping West Virginia to Republican, it wouldn't matter if he got Florida. He still would have lost by a couple of votes because that election literally was decided by two electoral votes. So without West Virginia, George Bush doesn't become president the first election. Um, so yeah, Florida was terribly important, but so was West Virginia, and that's a good example of why a popular vote. If it was just a popular vote, no one's going to campaign in West Virginia because there's not enough people in West Virginia for it to make sense. Same thing could be said for New Hampshire, for Wyoming, for any less populated state. I happen to live in Ohio, and so there's what's Ohio, the ninth or 10th most populated state. Ohio will always be. I shouldn't say always, but with the population distribution the way it is now, Ohio is a key state, and so candidates will always pay attention to Ohio for sure. But the Electoral College encourages coalition building. It encourages candidates to pay attention to everyone and all the states across the country instead of just focusing on population centers. That I think that'd be a very dangerous way. So what are the arguments against the Electoral College? Well, in my opinion, they're largely emotional arguments. I don't like it. I don't understand it, and I don't like it, so I don't think it should exist. Okay? Like you're entitled to that opinion, but that doesn't seem like a good reason to abolish something that, as we've just talked about, was well thought out. It was very clear why it was thought out the way it was, and I don't think emotion is the reason to make a change on that. If we wound up with a national democratic vote, I think it would get very dangerous very quickly. There's an argument around faithless electors, meaning the elector, let's just stick with our Republican winning the state. You send the Republican electors, and two of the 10 electors say, you know what? I think the Republican candidate's a piece of garbage. We're not going to cast our vote for him or her, and we're going to cast him for someone else. There's actually not a lot of federal law or federal punishments that are so heavy handed that it would make an elector not do that. In fact, since the inception of the Electoral College, starting with a guy named Samuel Miles back in 1796, who did not vote for John Adams, although his state of Massachusetts was carried by John Adams, there have been 157 electors total who voted contrary to their own state's popular vote. Um, so there's also an argument that what the founding fathers really meant when they established the Electoral College wasn't, well, it shouldn't be a democracy because that's dangerous. It was, we don't think the general public is well educated enough to make good decisions. And so we want a small group of people to actually elect the president. But because it was tied to the electors acting in accordance with the popular vote in their state, I think that argument rings pretty hollow. At least that's my opinion of it. So, and then the third is it's unpopular. Like we talked about, it's unpopular. A lot of people don't understand it. They think it's silly. They're ticked because they are in the majority and voted for a candidate who got the majority of votes across the country, but couldn't carry the Electoral College because they essentially had disenfranchised lots of states and people in the middle of the country and the smaller populated states. I mean, Hillary Clinton, talked about a basket of deplorables. Mitt Romney said there's 47% of voters aren't going to consider me at all. That's not a good approach to becoming president when you just say, you know what, I'm going to disregard the people who don't agree with me or disregard the people that don't support me. I think it's a terrible approach. And the Electoral College and the mechanism by which it actually elects the president encourages all the candidates to build a coalition and pay attention to all of the states. So that's kind of the precursor. I think the Electoral College is terribly important. I think it'd be a big mistake to get rid of it. It'd be very difficult to get rid of it because of the process by which you have to amend the Constitution, and I think that's a good thing. But that is how the Electoral College is. That's why it exists. That's where it is described, and kind of how it functions in practice. Hope you found that interesting. Hope you found it useful. Don't forget to go to our website, saltygingertalk.com. We've got all of our podcast episodes on there, newsletters on there, links to all of our social media, and our content is on there. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast on whatever format or forum platform you consume it on. And we really appreciate your support. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you next time.